episodes of the What's Cooking Digital Agriculture Learning Series, which is brought to you by the Data-Driven Digital Agriculture and Innovation team at the World Bank. I am Marie-Agnès Jouan-Jean, Senior Agriculture Economist at the World Bank, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. And so today's webinar is an opportunity to present a guidebook created by InSkip Entrepreneur in France for the World Bank, and which allow us to hear more about how to build startup ecosystems to leverage the private and public sector for the transformation of our food system. And this topic is really close to my heart, and I was really pleased to see the interest it was getting with a Couples Day back. I think already more than 400 registrations globally. So I don't know if all of you will join, but I think that's a good sign of the interest on this topic. And so before I introduce our chair, let me say a few words about the logistics of this webinar. So please keep your microphones on mute to prevent any background noise. Speakers are requested to answer clarification questions directly in the chat after they finish their presentations. There will be a Q&A sessions after the presentation, and you may type in the questions while the speakers are speaking, and we have colleagues, Michael and Parvati in the team, who will collect them, and they will be addressed during the Q&A sessions at the end of the webinar. Now, feel free to contact Sunil through personal chat if you have any concerns or technical issues. Can I just ask maybe InSkip to drop the presentation of this day so we can introduce also our chair for today, which is Diego Arias, Practice Manager in the World Bank Agriculture and Food Global Practice for the Latin America and Caribbean region, and who is going to say a few opening words. And as Diego will not be able to be with us, or I think only partially for the whole webinar today, I will be the one coming back for managing the discussion and the Q&A session. But Diego, over to you for the introduction.
Thank you, Marie-Agnès, and it's great to be chairing this session on building startup ecosystems. It's very critical and timely for the work we do, asking from us. I want to start by introducing our main speaker. Maxime Guillot is an entrepreneur and the founder of InSkip Entrepreneurs. InSkip is a French company dedicated to nurturing entrepreneurial ecosystems. Maxime has played a vital role in establishing multiple investment funds and acceleration programs aiming to foster robust and integrated ecosystems in Africa and Europe. And he has specialized on startups, fintech, like health and food. Maxime also mentors startups and guides them through their go-to-market strategies and financing issues. So today the idea is to look at the technical and institutional innovations that are needed to bring our food systems towards not just giving economic value to food and agriculture products, but also achieving human health objectives. So this transformation that we talk about on food systems need innovation to achieve those multiple objectives of economy, environment, and human health. And we know that there are innovative product services and business models that use technologies to address some of these market failures in food systems. And we also know that the innovation ecosystems at times in the food sector struggle to scale. We all heard great examples of technologies, pilots that have worked well, but have not yet reached scale. And this involves collaboration between public and private sector, knowing that public sector is often very involved in policies and investments towards food. So the entrepreneurship at startup ecosystem in the developing countries is crucial to bring together both the stakeholders and public sector and private sector, like entrepreneurs, farmers, investors. Also, we know startup ecosystems can provide a platform for all these stakeholders to interact and facilitate the growth of these agtech startups. So I'll hand it over to Maxime. The idea is to learn today a bit how some of these new approaches and technologies towards ecosystem strengthening work, especially on the institutional innovation side. And the World Bank commissioned a guidebook that will be presented consolidating these insights and also identifying options on what are the development paths based on, among other things, the maturity of these entrepreneurship ecosystems. So Maxime, over to you, and thanks again for presenting.
Thank you, Diego. I hope you can hear me right. So I'm just going to present briefly who we are and what we do in about a minute or two. We are a French consulting firm, being both consultants and entrepreneurs, and we've been working to foster and to develop the ecosystems, the whole ecosystems, taking all stakeholders into account worldwide. So we're located in 4 different offices in France, in Berlin, in Dubai, and in Morocco to tackle this ecosystems issue. And so what we do, we think we make and we grow these ecosystems, which means we try to develop everything that is needed to enable everything that the ecosystem needs. And we try to scale these ecosystems to foster and to develop all these new businesses, especially in terms of agriculture and agtech or agrotech startups. We will deep dive into the guidebook that we've been working on for the last 6 months. This guidebook gives a clear view of what to do and what are the best-in-class initiatives that were done and developed worldwide in different locations. And I'll be happy to hand over the mic to Lena to present the guidebook. That's pretty much it. Lena, up to you.
Thank you, Maxime. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Diego and Maxime, for introducing the session. I will be taking over on the presentation of the guidebook that we've conducted with the World Bank in the past few months. But first, just a short introduction. So we get to know each other as well. I am Lina Balmacci, and I'm a manager at Inskip Entrepreneurs. Before that, I have a background in biochemical engineering and entrepreneurship. And I also co-founded a project in agri-tech in Africa and how to find data-driven solutions that can fit the agricultural value chain pain points for smallholder farmers in the continent. And I also worked in startups in biotech and wellness. And just a brief introduction on the guidebook. So, as you know, agtech or agri-tech is an emerging field that combines both advanced technology and innovative practices or business models to try and revolutionize the farming industry and the agricultural sector. There's been more and more investments in the past few years, but it is still lower than expected compared to how this sector, the food and agricultural sector, has an impact on the global economy. We thus have 2 objectives. The first one is to respond to the urgent need to increase agricultural yields to ensure that we can feed the growing population around the world. And the second one is to promote the development of sustainable agricultural practices, to make sure we are aligned with the environmental and climate concerns, but also with the evolving needs of the consumers, whether it's on transparency, on traceability, or other subjects related to that. And we are facing many challenges, and part of this guidebook is to identify them. But just to give you a few of them, The first one would be the adoption barriers, because these technologies can require some financial investments, and the smallholder farmers don't really have the money to invest in that. Some infrastructures are not ready as well for this kind of technologies. There is a lack of standardization between the markets and between the regions, because there are a lot of disparities. And the market is also really volatile due to the weather that we were talking about, but also the pests and diseases that are a bit out of our control. And also the last point, and we will deep dive more into this today, which is the regulatory issues that we can have with the government that needs to keep up with the pace of the evolving technology in the sector. So the purpose of this guidebook is really to try and facilitate and help the different stakeholders of the agricultural value chain, whether it's public, private, or other actors from the chain, to develop and scale and grow the agtech startup ecosystems in the world, but especially in emerging markets where it's becoming more and more difficult. And for that, we are enabling them to make informed decisions based on best practices and concrete use cases, and trying to understand the types of investments that are needed, the type of activities that need support, and also what kind of partnerships we can put into place between these players to collaborate and help each other in developing these ecosystems. So for that, we developed a methodology at Inskip that was based on two different steps. The first one was to try and gather different points of views, because different actors have different objectives, different things in mind, different knowledge, and we wanted to have information coming from all these sides. The first side is the public authorities, try and understand how they think they can help and what kind of programs they can put in place to facilitate this ecosystems building. The second one is the startups themselves, trying to understand their needs, what challenges they are facing, and how we can help them grow. The third one is innovation programs, so incubators, accelerator programs, things like that. Try and understand how they can optimize the interactions and become hubs for all of the stakeholders. And the last one is financing actors, and try to find a way to de-risk their investments in this sector and try and bring up all the investment that has been made these past few years to another level. The second step of our methodology was to identify what kind of criteria we want to have and how we can prioritize the case studies we will be having in this guidebook, because a lot of countries are interesting to deep dive on, and we needed to have a mix and a sort of complementarity between the 10 case studies that we studied. So we wanted to have a variety of typology of actors, so public, private, academics, startups, funds. We wanted to have different maturity levels, different types of development within the country or the region, different funding strategies, different regulatory frameworks, but also some use cases from different sectors than agtech that we can benefit from because they are more advanced, for example, and that could be replicable to the agtech and food tech sector. And after this two-step methodology, we arrived at this selection of 10 different point of views and actors. We had one in Brazil, so you can see what type of ecosystem we're working on, and underneath you have the maturity level of each ecosystem. So we had one in Brazil, which is Plug and Play, which is an innovation platform. We had Station F in France, which is a private incubator that is really advanced, especially in the agtech sector now. We had two startups, one in Singapore, one in India, and we will have the pleasure to have a representative of Cropping sharing his insights later on. We also had the UM6P ecosystem, which is a university related to a corporate in Morocco. We had the 1 Million Farmer platform in Kenya, which is also working with the World Bank. Another government initiative in Ghana, one in Dubai, which is the Food Tech Valley. So it's really how to create a city around agtech. We had a GFI initiative in Africa with Proparco, which is the financial arm of the French Agency for Development, and a VC fund, Trend Lines Group, which is between Israel and Asia. And we will also have the chance to hear one of their representatives later on today. So from these different case studies, we identified 6 challenges. It may seem quite obvious, but we will go into more details afterwards and try and deep dive on concrete examples for each one. But just to have a macro idea, the first one was on data, how to access it and how to access to reliable and transparency in this kind of information. The second one is financing. Obviously, there is a lack of funding, especially at early stages of development. The third one is how to find product market fit. So how to manage the difference between the reality on the ground and the new developments related to technology. The fourth one is related to culture. There is still a lag of entrepreneurial mindset, especially in emerging countries, and making technology transfer really difficult, especially for researchers emerging from the AgTech ecosystem, and some governance issues also that we will have a look at that can pose problem to the programs that are implemented. The ecosystem problem is more related to the lack of interactions between the different players, and we really need to find a way to align the incentives between them and align the objectives. And lastly, it's related to regulations. So how we can attract foreign talent, how we can harmonize the legal frameworks in the different parts of the world to make things easier for these ecosystems to thrive. So if we look at the enablers, we will have a look at the enablers for each point of view that we discussed earlier. If we start with the point of view of public authorities, we have identified 4 different enablers. The first one is how to create new regulations in accordance with emerging trends and market needs. For example, in India, they have launched new regulations related to data privacy, making it much more easier for startups in the AgTech world to access data and share it also with farmers, for example, on the weather or things like that. The second one is we need to facilitate administrative procedures, especially with the creation and closing also of companies, and also bringing foreign companies into your country. And for that, the Food Tech Valley in Dubai was really good in this aspect, as they have created partnerships with public actors in Emirates to make sure that all the legislation, all the admin part, all the procedures are made easier for companies. The third one is obviously trying to find a way to get some public budgets into the ag and food sector. And for that, Trendlines found a really interesting collaboration with the Singapore in the past few years, which has allowed them to find grants also for startups and not just for financing public programs, for example. And finally, we need to find ways to implicate commercial banks in public programs. And for that, we need to have some sort of incentive for them. So for example, in the GASIC program, they tried to involve these banks, but it was difficult because it was done later on during the program. If it was done before, it would have made a lot of sense, for example, to assign part of the public budget that was assigned to the program to the commercial banks so they can lend money to the farmers that were part of this program. And then they risk their investments, obviously. If we look now at the point of view of startups, we also have 4 enablers identified. The first one is passing through local intermediaries. For startups, it is really hard to go to market directly tackling farmers. They can pass through cooperatives, farmer organizations, or some sort of associations that would allow them to lower their acquisition costs, but also gather data that is already harmonized at a central level. The second enabler is to develop regional solutions. So for example, startups are really focused on their first market, and sometimes it is too niche, so it's not attractive for investors. And if they have in mind from the beginning that they want to internationalize or they want to create a Pan-African market, a Pan-African company, for example, they will be more attractive and they will be able to raise funds more easily. The third one is we need to adapt. These startups need to adapt to the market and its evolutions. They are developing a lot of innovations, but they need to make sure that they are responding to a specific need on the ground to make sure that farmers will use it, will adopt it, and will have the money to buy it and to pay for this solution. And finally, it is related to IP. This is something that is not done enough in the agtech sector. They need to have some sort of coaching on IP strategies, especially for researchers that are becoming founders afterwards, to ensure that we have some technology transfer processes in place and that the ownership of this IP stays within the startup's assets. If we look now at the point of view of innovation programs, the first thing that is extremely important is to make sure that we create ecosystems that involve all stakeholders. So academia, startups, corporates, public entities, funds, and that we cover all their needs. And then there is also a really big need on acculturation. And this needs to be free and accessible to all, especially some sort of trainings on entrepreneurial mindsets for future entrepreneurs, for service providers as well. And for example, Plug and Play in Brazil is doing that with corporates. Because corporates want to work with startups. They also want to launch sometimes program within their own industry, but they are not aware of what they can do and they need someone to accompany them in this process. The third one is differentiating programs, because agri-tech and food tech is a huge, huge sector. And to make sure that the value proposition offered by the innovation program is strong, we need to make sure that it is on a specific vertical and that it is really talking to the person, the target in front. For the two last ones, the first one is exchanging information and data with the public sector. Some partnerships are made, but for now they are mostly focused on financial interactions, so getting money from these public actors. Whereas it's really important to also exchange the data and information that, for example, an innovation program gathers from the startups' needs or from the different type of other partnerships they have with the industry. And Station F in France is really good at that because they have a whole ecosystem, a physical place in Paris where they have the French government giving access to all of the other incubators, all of the universities, all of the startups that are incubated and accelerated within the program. And finally, there is an issue related to governance, especially in public programs. So it is important to try and clarify this governance and assign clear tasks to everyone, even if sometimes outsourcing to expert suppliers can be necessary. And this is what the 1 Million Farmers platform in Kenya did as well. They are more acting as a catalyzer, and they are working with local partners that are really experts in their fields. For example, in the coaching of startups, early stage startups, they will partner with an incubator in place. And finally, the point of view of financing actors. The first thing that is really important, as we were talking earlier about the lack of funding, especially at early stages, it is important to create a continuum of complementary investment players and financing tools as well. For example, Proparco, the financial arm of the AFD, has developed what we call a bridge financing, a bridge investment, and they are providing money in between stages. So for example, in between a seed and Series A fundraising for a startup. And it has proven to be really, really efficient because there is clearly a lack of investment at this part of development for startups, and it sometimes makes them quit for the founders. And this type of investment is solving this issue. The second one is trying to build a strong network and knowledge and know-how on what's going on the field. Because for financing actors like VC funds, they are sometimes scared to invest in the agtech sector because the technology is really difficult to understand, or it is really focused on a niche. And these actors need to have experts like an advisory board, a scientific advisory board, or something like that, to help them understand these startups and be able to evaluate them at the end. And lastly, it is important to build also partnerships between the startup companies within your portfolio and corporates. For example, UM6B, as we said, is a university that is a subsidiary of a corporate that is called OCP. And they have put in place some proof of concepts between OCP, the industrial actor, and the startups they want to invest in. So it's sort of a playground for the startup to test their solutions before getting the investment. And then it's also a proof for the future founder, the future investor, to know that the solution is working and that there is a demand on the industrial side. And this was just a first overview of the different enablers we looked at. So this is more insights, information, knowledge. But now, if you want to really implement it on the ground, we have developed two different tools for the World Bank, but it can be used in any other ecosystem. The first one is this practical tool here to assess the maturity level of an ecosystem. So as you can see, we are looking at 6 different dimensions: the country level, the market, the different partnerships, the value proposition, the finance, and the talent. And for each of these 6 dimensions, we have 4 different criteria that we will score and that will be weighted. And then at the end, you get an overall score out of 10. In the guidebook, you have all the matrix, all the grid with the details, of course, but I just wanted to make it simpler for today. But basically you get a score, an overall score out of 10. And with this score, you can determine if your ecosystem is nascent, if you have a score between 0 and 3, if it's intermediate, if it's between 3 and 7, or if it's more advanced, if it's between 7 and 10. And for each of these different ecosystem maturity, you will have different things to put in place. You cannot have the same action plan for a nascent ecosystem than an advanced one. And we have some information that is high-level information, but we will show you afterwards a little bit more details. But for example, if we look at the collaborations to develop and the players to involve in the ecosystem, for a nascent ecosystem, you will more focus on accessing the farmers' organizations and trying to enhance their productivity and have a social impact. And for that, we think that the most important thing is to create partnerships within 3 parties: the public, the private, and the farmers. And acculturation is key. This is why, in terms of solutions, the basic solutions, traditional solutions, will be the most benefiting most to this ecosystem. So for example, trainings on best practices or marketplaces for inputs for farmers or things like that. And for this kind of activities, the financing will come mostly from governments or from development agencies, development banks, because they are more focused on the impact on the ground. If we move to a more intermediate level maturity, here, you usually have some local startups. They are still early stage, they need to scale. And for that, the basic need is to have incubators in place, because they will provide the training and the coaching of soft and hard skills for the entrepreneurs that do not have this culture yet. They will help them with coaching on how to get to their product market fit. They will allow them also to develop some corporate partnerships, as we were talking about earlier with UM6P. And they will also help them collaborate with the ecosystems in the region. And for that, you will have a mix of traditional solutions, but also some more innovative ones, such as smart irrigation systems. And in terms of financing, you will still have the need for public financing, but you will also start to be appealing for some local private actors, some VC funds, for example, that are focused on a region. If we move to the more advanced ecosystem, now we need to really consolidate all of this and have an all-in-one offer. usually in a physical space as Station F did, and have acceleration programs. The goal is to go to scale. And for that, you need to attract international startups, but also develop the local ones. You need to have communication, events, create hubs of innovation and things like that. And as the ecosystems becomes more globally attractive, it will become attractive also to international actors, to business angels that will complement the public and private actors that are already financing the ecosystem. And in this kind of advanced sector, you will have solutions that are much more disruptive, such as what we saw with food tech, alternative proteins, for example. You can see here that as we move on the maturity level and as we have more and more mature ecosystems, you have an involvement of the players that is also going crescendo. At first, the focus is more on the public and the GFIs and the farmers, but then at the end, you can see that it switches to startups and private corporations and agribusinesses because they will have the money and they will be the ones that can take the impact from the public actors. Just to give you a brief idea of what was the second tool was the action plan. We developed one for each point of view, so each actor, but also for each maturity level. This is just one example for the local government for intermediate level of maturity. And it shows you what kind of exchanges they can have with the different actors and what kind of concrete actions they can put in place. So, for example, they can help put political initiatives with academia, with universities to try and create technology transfer mechanisms. They can exchange information with innovation programs. They can give grants for hiring and training of talent. They can also facilitate putting in contact the different actors like cooperatives, agribusinesses, and some actors of financing. I will not go into much details for the sake of time, but of course, we will share with you, if you want, the complete guidebook where it has much more details on these different action plans. To finish, we just have a short case study to show you what it looks like. We have that folder made for each of the 10 case studies that we worked on. This is one of the examples, so Proparco, an intermediate level of maturity. So first we looked at the context in general of the initiative of the ecosystem, how it was created, when it was created, what is the context in the country or in the region, and why it made sense to create such an initiative. Then we go into more details of the kind of interactions they have in place, what kind of stakeholders are involved in this ecosystem. So for example, for Proparco, they are involved with incubators, with other financial firms, with local governments and agencies, but also with GFIs such as IFC, part of the World Bank, or the FMO. And they have really this central role in investing in this in the private sector. Finally, we have some zoom on the operations they have in place, how they work, what kind of team they have in place, and what are the perspectives in the next few years. We have here a little focus on the bridge fund that I was talking about. And for that, they actually put it in place in collaboration with Digital Africa, which is another subsidiary of the AFD. And they have made this investment there, this dedicated fund for early stage startups that need money in between stages of fundraising. In terms of financing, how they get their money, where they get their money from, where they can put it in, and usually it's in different types of investing actors. And one success story that will be interesting to look at as well is that they have developed an African private equity fellowship that we are actually operating at Inscape Entrepreneurs. And it had one goal, is to train the different investors in the African continent to make sure they can have all the skills in hand and all the networking, all the different information, insights, and players at hand to help them make more investments and also more intelligent investments to de-risk their investments and to make sure that the continent is evolving in terms of investment in startups in general. And finally, you have some best practices and challenges for each case study to make sure that it can be reused for your ecosystem if you are part of an ecosystem, or if it is for a client, for example, for the World Bank, if you want to have a discussion with the government and you want to have some ideas of what to put in place, you can definitely use these different case studies and these different enablers. I think we're good on our side. Thank you so much. And I will hand over to Sujit from Cropin, the Indian startup that we were talking about, and Sarai right afterwards from Trendlines Fund.
Lena, hello everyone, good evening. So from a perspective of sharing our experience at Cropin, we started way back in 2010, and this was a time period when AgTech was not even a coined word. There was nothing called as technology in agriculture. It was all sporadic. We started with the vision, can we digitize every single farmland on this particular planet and make it sustainable and productive? We initially started with the idea that we will probably go and start working with farmers directly, but as very rightly highlighted even in the guidebook, at that nascent stage, it made more sense to work with intermediaries. And that's when we pivoted to work with intermediaries, which were organizations like governments, public sector development agencies, or private sector development agencies, and agribusinesses. And through them, we reached out to farmers to make an impact. And that was our starting point. We focused on building out of India. The advantage that we had as a result of starting off in India was the fact that India was a great representation of the microcosm of the global agriculture ecosystem. It has large farm holding patterns. It has got small farm holding patterns. It has over 15 different agroclimatic conditions. It's got a diverse crop variety portfolio. It is also the food basket. It does export a lot of the produce that it produces. It also imports. So we had all those use cases that we could really solve for. So there was scale. The market was available in India, and we had a strong government ecosystem supporting the agriculture ecosystem through public spending and very structured programs that were built over a period of time. And one good reference, and this is what I'm going to probably share as insights of our own growth and how we evolved through various stages, is the first model was being able to work in your native country of origin. In our case, it was India. We were lucky that we had a government that was spending. For example, a classic example is the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, which is probably by far the largest public sector supported crop insurance program in the world. Now, when they decided to launch that program, they were also bringing in private players, not just startups like us, but also private insurance players into the program. They ensured that there was a central agency that created a structured framework of what is going to be acceptable in this program. For example, how will technology be used? What kind of outcomes can be considered as acceptable? What kind of technologies, and even going to the detailing of the kind of models, AI/ML models that will be approved. Everything was nailed down and created like a guidebook, and then it was handed over to all the states across the country. Because in India, agriculture is a state subject. Now that meant that there was no ambiguity, even for players like us who participated in the whole program of building that pilot, etc., with the centralized agency that the Indian government had put together. We got empaneled. There was a defined way of engaging with government, irrespective of which state governments that we will end up engaging with. And state governments use that as the guidebook to actually come out with requests of proposals. We knew what we were actually pitching in for. We had already prepared our solutions in that direction. So it made it easy for startups like us to really engage and scale along with the program. That's one example of what helped us, frankly. And this is just public-private partnership. Another example of the model that's really worked for us, because today our solutions are deployed across 100 plus countries, that really worked for us was our partnership with development agencies globally, where development agencies are acting as intermediaries of working with private players, with governments themselves, to help them understand how could they use technology to solve different aspects. One example is the work that we are doing with BMGF in the African continent, where there is specific focus on solving for food security around certain major crops like maize, paddy. Now, it's very difficult for governments to try and build the framework of how to engage technology players like us, build a framework of what kind of technology solution will help them in probably creating the right decision making system. But that's where an intermediary like a development agency comes to play, helped us build that framework, get the buy-in from the government, and then worked with us to really deploy that solution and showcase it to the governments involved on what is the kind of outcome and output that they can get, so that they have a proof of concept now that they can invest in and bring in other investment parties, etc. That is another model that really helped us scale in a lot of markets. And the third, but not the least, is working with intermediaries like private players, agribusinesses themselves, input providers like seed production companies, crop protection companies, also FPOs, finance, which is banks who are into building credit products, or insurance companies building risk products, as well as food processing companies. Here, what helped was they were all struggling to solve for various use cases that they had to solve for the farming communities that they engage with, because at the end of the day, they were focused on ensuring they make profits, but they are not a technology company at the core. And that's where they had several innovation programs where they were open to engage with startups like us. That gave us an opportunity to work with them to build the product platform that actually solves for their use cases, and in the bargain solve for the similar use cases for players across that industry segment. For example, for the coffee value chain, or the potato value chain, or the seed production value chain. That helped us build a market ready solution that we could then take to more players and scale. And that was a third model of framework that truly worked for us. So combination of those three really worked. But at the end of the day, the important part, and I completely resonate with some of the insights shared in the guidebook, start with wherever you are and solve for the ecosystem that you operate in. But always keep your eye on globalization is what I would refer to as. Because without that, you will face constraints of being able to scale and grow further, because this does require investment. And for you to attract investment from various players, including government saying, I'm ready to work with you, is going to be able to show them that you know how to scale this. And that can only come from the mindset of being ready to globalize whatever you're building. So those were some of our learnings. And today, where we stand, we are really building a global ecosystem platform, where we have launched the first industry cloud platform for agriculture, where we clearly believe that we won't be able to solve everything by ourselves. So can we enable other solutions also to come and integrate into our core platform, and thus unlock more value for more players with the least amount of heavy lifting. And last but not the least, we are now in the journey of integrating generative AI into our platform, so that we can actually truly democratize agriculture intelligence for anyone and everyone out there in the agri value chain, without any background on what's probably happened, where they can ask simple questions and get information or access to intelligence right out of the platform. That's where we see the future going, because we want to be able to democratize and just scale access to ag tech for players. That's a quick overview on the cropping journey. Thank you for listening in. Sarai, over to you.
Hi guys. Thank you, Sujit. It really resonated what you said about going global. Coming from a small country, Israel, and also working in Singapore, which is also a small agriculture country, it's essential. So any startup we look at has to go global, I think, from day one. And I really appreciate what you just said. I'm going to share my presentation. I prepared a few slides picturing the ecosystem both in Israel and in Singapore, to give you some numbers also. Let's see if I can do it correctly. You use your own, you don't use not Zoom and no Teams, so but let's see. I managed, right?
Yes.
Okay,
You
great.
can just put it on full screen.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Okay.
Yes, perfect.
So a little bit about Trendlines and myself. So I start with myself. I've been working in the ag and food industry for the last 16 years. My background is mainly business, studied in an Israeli ag tech company, selling both software and hardware components to dairy farms, mainly in Southeast Asia. Did a lot of agriculture projects in developing countries. And then I moved to the Trendlines group. I've been working in Trendlines for the last 10 years, and I'm responsible for the investment activities in ag and food with part of a team. And I'm an expert in investing in ag and food startups. This is what I do day in and day out. Trendlines Group is an Israeli company, publicly traded on Singapore Stock Exchange. And this is why we also have a strong activity base in Singapore. We've been existing for the last 15 years, 7 years as a public company. We have different vehicles of investments. I'll explain a little bit more about them later on. Currently, we have 55 portfolio companies, about half in medical device and half in ag and food. Our portfolio company raised close to $500 million over the years, and we had 10 exits out of our portfolio company. Specifically in ag and food, we have 23 portfolio companies. This is not the amount of companies we invested in. This is the companies that we currently have, which means we closed down a few. This is part of our business. We invested in over 30 companies in ag and food, and today we have 23. About half of those technologies originated in an academia-based technology, where we were the venture builders of that technology. We licensed the technology. We created a team around that technology, and the company built up. And then about half came from private entrepreneurs. Half of our companies already at revenue stage. Below you will see the 4 pillars that we have of investments. So we are collaborating with the Israel Innovation Authority in Israel. We have an incubator, and I'll explain what the model is. Then we have a fund together with Bayer Crop Science that we co-invest together in technologies that are relevant to Bayer's core interest. Then we have the Singapore Fund, which is a fund that is based in Singapore but invests globally, farm to fork across the ag and food supply chain. Sweet spot is seed pre-A investments, which means early commercialization, I would say. And then we also have in Singapore, we have an incubator and accelerator. Both are supported by local government agencies, so very similar to the Israeli model. So we have support from Seeds Capital, which is a government agency, and Enterprise Singapore, another government agency. So we either invest off our balance sheet in companies through the incubators that we have both in Israel and in Singapore, or we invest through the funds that we have, where we are the general partner of the fund, and we have an investment committee with different members that takes a decision to invest in a company. And we also do co-creation. So we team up with industry partners like Mondelez and Bayer, where we identify a need of those companies, and we scout for a specific technology that can meet that specific need, and we create a company together. So we did that with Mondelez, company, for instance, that grows cocoa powder and cocoa butter in fermenters rather than on a tree. And then with Bayer, we've did a bunch of companies through the fund that we have. We're very active in creating and building the ecosystem. Ecosystem means you gather all the different players of your industry, which is ag and food, which includes startups, academia, government, and obviously investors, and try to create some kind of a community. So in Israel, we are the pioneers of the largest ag tech investment conference in Israel that gathers more than 1,000 attendees each year. In Singapore, we are the proud founders of a WhatsApp group, which seems to be very, very active. And really, all of the different members of the community are there. And it sparks a lot of conversation and, swapping ideas with one another, and also creating some real life activities and events. A little bit about Israel, and I have similar information about Singapore as well. In Israel, on again, average day, you have about 600 different ag and food startups at different stages. In 2022, they raised about $700 million. Previously, they raised $1 billion. But all of the industry is going down from investment perspective. So this is relatively, I would say, similar numbers in all countries from the decreased amount. We rank number 4 as a hub in agri-food. Usually takes into account the number of startups and investors and deals that you have. From an investment perspective, back in 21, we ranked number 7. And Israel is ranked number 1 for many years now, with having the highest expenditure on R&D as part of the percentage of out of the GDP on OECD countries. And this is continued to be number 1 in the last few years. What makes Israel very special, I think, is the combination of these 4 groups of ecosystem players. One, you have the growers. Israel is a very active agriculture company, very similar to India in that perspective, obviously much smaller, but we have almost all the types of the agriculture verticals in Israel, except I would say for very large open fields and grain providers. So we grow a little bit of wheat, but we don't do corn and soy just because of the size that we import. But the rest of the stuff is everything grown in Israel. And we grow enough also to do exports. We have very strong R&D players from the academia. So we have 300 different research groups in the different academia organizations that are only focused on agriculture and food. Then we have the industry. Industry is both private entrepreneurs, but also a lot of industry companies. So agriculture companies, food companies, and a very high presence of multinationals in Israel. This is a core competent because when you are an early startup and you want to engage with the global industry that is relevant for you, it is not enough to start with Israel or with the country that you are at. The Israeli farmers are very good at being beta sites to test out your technology and to fine tune it before you go global. But once you want to go global, you need those MNCs, maybe on a technology level, even just the regular stuff of Amazon and Amazon services and and Microsoft with just the cloud services that they have globally, but also the global players like Bayer and Syngenta, all of them have presence in Israel, which makes the scale up and the connectivity to the global industry very easy compared to other countries, I would say. And then we have the government with different programs. So with the government, we have 2 entities that support Israeli startups. One is the Israel Innovation Authority with different programs, specifically on ag and food. There are 4 incubators that have some kind of an ag and food angle that they support. There's 1 corporate innovation lab that is focused on food tech. And over the years, on an average, they provide about $35 million investments in new startups in this field. With the Ministry of Agriculture, usually they team up with the Israel Innovation Authority, and then they have specific pilot programs to test new technologies where they fund those new technologies and the collaboration with farmers in Israel. So that program, usually they invest $6 million. It's not a lot of money, but it's a way to penetrate the market and to test the new technology. And they have a lot of funding for academic research in ag and food. So these are the leading universities. All of them have some kinds of ag and food research groups. These are some of the multinational companies that have presence in Israel, and you would see there across the different verticals. You have both in food and animal health, and chemistry, and drinks and CPGs, consumer packaged goods, really everything. And it's not just that they have like a production facility in Israel. They have some kind of an innovation arm in Israel, actively scouting for new technologies. And that innovation arm is connected to the central innovation arm. So again, scaling up becomes easier. These are some of the accelerators and incubators and innovation centers. You see, it's quite a lot. All of them are focused on ag and food. So there's quite a lot of variety. When we look in Singapore, it's a similar model, but younger because it started only 4 or 5 years ago. We were one of the first ones to come. So back in 2016, they had almost 20 startups in ag and food. 2021, they grew to 120. This is a lot in Singapore numbers. And back in 21, those startups raised $1 billion, which is also a lot. It's first from, in Asia perspective, it's the first country to attract so much money. They created, the government created 6 new accelerators. They hunted down companies like us globally that have proved that they can build an ecosystem where they come. So they hunted someone from Israel, us, someone from Australia, someone from the States, and they lured us to come to Singapore and set up similar activities in Singapore. So these are the 6 accelerators. They have a government plan, which is called Seeds Capital, that provides investments, with a budget that is allocated specifically for this, of 90 million Sing dollars. And we use that program. So these are the accelerators. We are one of them, but you have Hatch on aquaculture, and you have Grow, I think they're from Australia. The Yield Lab is a global one. And then you have the investors that use the Seeds Capital money, as we do. And they also, take pride in trying to foster collaboration between the startups and the multinationals that they have, and also the multinationals that are more regional, like Olam. It's a commodities company, but it has a very strong presence in Southeast Asia. LDC, it's a global company, but have a strong activity in aquaculture in Singapore. Nestle is also running some kind of a program. So they're really trying to foster that type of collaboration within the local ecosystem. That's it. I'm open for questions. Did I stop sharing?
Thank you very much to all of you. I'm taking the floor again. Thanks to all the presentation from Nina and Maxime, and to the intervention from Sujit and Sarah. I think that was, to me, very interesting. And before I give the floor to the discussions, just a few points for you to already think about for the next conversation, hoping that we can have maybe an interactive conversation between you all. But a few points I really liked and are really resonating. I just came back from Kenya. I just read an ecosystem analysis from Madagascar, different countries, different level of maturity. We had some comments saying that some of these initiatives from very mature ecosystem are really not to be reproduced in these other ecosystems, but we've heard from the guidebook some different options for this to happen, which having the experience for both these 2 countries, I think are very relevant. But some things that I particularly liked, and maybe we can reflect on a bit more, how to align incentives. I think that's really is the key element here. Reflecting on what I just read about Madagascar, the issue of entrepreneurship culture, which is extremely important. And, me coming from a research background, knowing that it's really not easy to step into this entrepreneurship mindset and taking risks. So how do we de-risk? How do we allow all the stakeholders to feel that they can take that risk of developing new ideas and testing new markets? And maybe some reflections on experience also with our own colleagues at the World Bank. We have people from the agriculture ecosystem, but also from more the private sector. And when you talk to them about how the World Bank can support these ecosystems, they come to you and say, well, no, it's a private sector initiative. So, but we see from the experience presented in this guidebook that the government is really important. So, how can we think of a short answer for them? And really liking the experience of both cropping and on the Israel and Singapore side, and reflection also the role of corporate companies. There were some comments about this. So can we, we've heard about the role of governments. We saw some elements about corporate companies, but how could they maybe be an actor for this? And last word before I introduce our next speaker, I think, one thing that we are guilty of at the World Bank is, because of our system, of course, we focus on farmers and, impacting farmers directly, but maybe in this ecosystem, we need to really identify the right intermediaries to work with, right? We've seen in these nascent ecosystems, we should work with cooperatives, if they even exist, to be honest, or maybe our role is to create them around the use of innovation. And maybe that's a little bit more the experience of what's happening in Kenya, actually, where we've connected creating groups, innovations and trainings, and we can see what's being picked up. But the digital part doesn't necessarily go directly to the farmer, but maybe the person who trains the farmer. So without further ado, at my end, I would like to introduce our discussant for today. And I warmly welcome Professor Lubna El Mansouri, who's the director of the digital pole of the Ministry of Agriculture in Morocco. Morocco is investing a lot in the digital ecosystem and in developing ways to allow its farmers to access e-services. And so giving you the floor, Lubna, to tell us more about what's going on in Morocco and maybe a bit more how the World Bank can support you in developing your ecosystem. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. Merci, Marie-Agnès, to associate me in this webinar. And I would just present myself more. So I'm Lubna Mansouri, but I am digital hub or a pole of agriculture ministry in Morocco. But my background, I'm coming from data science for academia. So it's very important to me, this background, because this is what allows to me to understand how technology can be built in agriculture digital transformation. So at the first, I want just to outline that the presentation of in Skip was very interesting, and their funding meet highly what we are doing in our operational strategy of Digital Hub. So just to present correctly, so our institution, we are a new institution created 1 year ago, and created under the frame of Green Generation Strategy, which is the agriculture policy of Morocco that frame the sector from 2020 to 2030. And this new institution is created and dedicated especially to transformation, digital transformation of agriculture sector. When we tell agriculture sector, it means private and public part. And which is also particular for our institution that we are a JP. It means a cluster of 11 institutions, which including Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Finance and Economy, and the key players of the agriculture ecosystem. Key players of academia, research and development institution, 4 institutions, and the institution of also of working on agriculture in Morocco, like ONCA, which is the advisory agency, which had the contact directly with farmer, and ONSA, which is working agency work on quality of food in Morocco. And also we have the bank to ensure this part or this component of funding. We have insurance, La Mamda. Also, so we are creating a small ecosystem, because in Morocco, I think that we have understand that to transform or to include digitalization in sector, moreover, at farmer level, we need to work together. We need to have a common vision between public, which is present with ministry, and other key players in the sector. This is not the responsibility or the role alone for public sector, but also for private sector. This is why I find that what you are presenting as a guideline are very interesting. Also, at local level, internally, we have done some mapping and some analysis of ecosystem, and we understand well that the startup or private sector in generally, enterprises, startup, research, development, result also all those actors are the high role to play in order to drive technology to farmer, moreover the small farmer, which we are in our concern at the ministry, and they represent more than 85% of farmers in Morocco. So in this sense, I want just to make some element that meet our what you are presented. So in our action plan or our master plan, we work on education. We call it education, what we call acculturation, what we call capacity building. Yes, we are agreed that it's a key axis in order to develop the transformation of the sector and include technology. But just the idea that the small farmer it's not ready to accept technology, it's not, so it depends. Because I think that it depends highly on how we present the service, how we present technology. We have some tests with local farmer, and we find that the packaging of the service, how we present it, if it is very simple and not necessitate any engagement of download in something or subscribe, just like voice message that we can receive by voice and we can answer by voice, it works really good without any problem, and they are very active to receive this technology. But if the technology are consuming in terms of expertise, this necessitates other mechanism to make it consumable with agriculture, with farmer. This is the first just a remark that I have on what is presented. The second one that added to education that is important from top management to farmer, not just farmer, for education and for capacity building. We need to understand what are, because we speak a lot about technology, IoT, deep learning, machine learning, artificial intelligence. There are many, many words this day, but I think that we need to have a common understanding of all this word. For top management, it's very important that they can include this new notion, new technology, new concepts in their conception of projects and in their how they can make their strategy. They must understand how can be useful to how they can be contribute to achieve the KPIs of agriculture strategy in general, like the well-being of agriculture, the higher productivity, higher yield, and so on. They must understand that yes, it's possible by many ways. So after education, that I think it's very important from top management to farmer, and also how we package the service or the technology in general manner. This is the second way that I think that it's very interesting. The third thing, that it's really that the ecosystem of digital agriculture or the agri-digital, each actor has his role, his responsibility, and his connection with the other actors. But we think also that startup has a high role to do. And in Morocco, I think I don't follow all steps of your guidebook, but I think that we are in the intermediate level, I'm not sure. But I think that our ecosystem of startup, in Morocco, we have many acceleration program, innovation program. We have more than, we make some mapping and found that we have in Morocco more than 100 accelerator and incubator. And every year we have about 10 and 20 acceleration program. But up to now, the rate of transfer of this technology are very low. So there is something in this chain value between technology production, development, and creation, and technology consumption. There is some gap, and we are working. And here I ask you, this is something that we need your help in, how we can maximize and accelerate this transfer to farmer. And one of the ideas that we have found in our international benchmark is to make some digital farm, like demonstrator, and also to assist the technology, because I know that in acceleration program, every startup will have, before being selected, assessment, entrepreneurial assessment, technological assessment, but professional assessment. It means that I think you have already tell this in your guidebook, like fitting the market. This is the idea. The technology could be where, and robust, strong scientifically, and even if the business plan is also good, but it's not fit the market, it's not fit the needs of farmer. So with this assessment, I think professional assessment or assessments in the farmer to test this technology, to validate it in different configuration, in different crop, in different situation, could give us a good idea about the operationality of this technology, concretely how we can use it, or how we can make trust in. Also, this digital farm that we try to create, a network of digital farm, it will be also a space of open of all ecosystem. This is also can reinforce the relationship between all key players of ecosystem. It will be open to researchers, to companies, to cooperate, to make some tests, to discuss, and to have also some pedagogical visits, some demonstration, because without the farmer, I think the spirit farm is the same all over the world, but in the Moroccans, if the farmer can see the technology and the results of the technology and how it enhances their own KPIs, it will be less trusting than if you can test it.
Thank you so much, Lubna, for your perspective. So I think there's a clear ask already to our panelists and to InSkip, which is, how do you maximize the transfer to farmers, and what are the solutions that we've seen around the world that we're allowing this connection. So I don't know if someone wants to speak first, take the floor. I let you take the floor. Nina, maybe, do you want to say a few words?
Sure. So the question is, how do we get this information to the farmers on the ground?
Yes, I think that what Lubna was mentioning is that there are so many technologies available, but how do we make them useful? How do we connect the last elements of which is basically, the whole section of this, the whole purpose of the guidebook, but I guess the last mile, really, how do we get it to the farmers and to convince them of the use?
Yes. So from my side, I would say there are maybe three things. The first thing is, before trying to get a technology to the farmers on the ground, the actor that is trying to do that, whether it's a startup, a program, or a corporate, or anyone, they need to really gather insights on their needs beforehand, because they need to adjust their product or their service to the reality on the ground and to make sure that it matches. The first thing is to really go on the ground, discuss with these farmers or the cooperatives that we talked about. So trying to pass through intermediaries to collect this information before offering a product or a service. The second thing, I believe, is to also have other type of actors interacting with them. So we talked a lot about the ecosystems, but it's actually what is most important to me is that you don't go there with one product and you try to convince a farmer to buy it. For me, what is really important is to come as a consortium of actors. So if you go into a community of farmers, for example, in a specific value chain, you need to go there, and the go-to-market needs to have a financing actor, an insurance actor, a public actor, or a program that will give all the soft skills and the acculturation that we were talking about, but also an actor like a startup that will be really on the ground to make sure there is a follow-up on the usage of this new technology. And the third thing that is important to have in mind is depending on the level of maturity, again, not all technologies are made for all countries or all value chains or all typologies of farmers. It is important to start maybe small, but with a large group of people that will get to the next stage of development before trying to propose really high-tech or really developed technologies when the reality on the ground is not there yet. I don't know if someone wants to add on, but thank you.
Yes, I was going to say that. I don't know if anyone wants to take the floor. Go on.
Yeah, I've got a perspective on this, as in, and I'll try and visualize this for the audience. For point number one, we all are building technologies, and there are several startups building technologies. There are agribusinesses building technologies. Governments are trying to build something and also get the farmers to adopt it. There's just too many things. At the end of the day, it's the same farmer that we all are trying to extend this technology to. So the best way, the way I see this, the way we should build towards the future is where the last mile part of the tech stack has to be owned by the government of that particular country. It can't be given to other stakeholders. And that's what, for example, in India, we are trying to build the agri stack. We've got a great and parallel reference. For example, we built the entire fintech stack, which we're calling as the India stack, where things like Aadhaar, where every Indian has got a digital ID, okay, that is linked, and players can actually use that to be able to deliver their services to users. We also got the UPI, which is the payment gateway backbone that is built by the Indian government. So that last mile for the end user is built and owned by the government. And then everyone else, which is every player who's building out things, will integrate into that particular stack. So for the farmer, there's only one interface and not multiple interfaces of trying to gain benefits of technologies or solutions or innovations being built out. And I truly believe that's the way to go. There can't be any other way. Otherwise, all that we're creating is just a lot of noise and confusing the grower or farmer community, which will only create more barriers for them to adopt. So that's my limited submission.
Anyone else wants to take the floor? It's all right. Ideas or yeah.
Just to add, I think it is what Sujit just described. I think it's wonderful that is taking place in India, but to be very honest, I think it might only be suitable for developing countries that have maybe smaller farm plots, smaller farmers, that technology is not implemented yet to its full extent. If you're talking about developed countries like Israel, United States, maybe even Europe to some degree, although they have smaller plots, I think it will be difficult to get something that is centralized from the central government, just because farming is operational structured differently in those countries. Even though the government owns the land, at least in Israel, I mean, it's not, you lease the land from the government. It's still, letting the farmers take something that is centralized from the government. I don't think it will, they won't swallow it so well. Farmers like to be independent. They like to control the information. So it really depends on the country. I wish it was the case, but I see it very difficult to implement.
Thanks to all. I think these are all very interesting points. And yet again, we see the difference of maturity of the ecosystem. And maybe the idea is that we start with a strong government, but we need to have in mind that, later on in a more mature ecosystem, there needs to be space for, you know, these companies to be able to reach out directly to the farmers. But it's always a little bit difficult, right, to see the transition, but something to really think about more carefully. So adding my 2 cents, and I really like the fact that both Nina and Sujit, you know, went to the point of actually the noise, you know, and maybe the element of bundling, of trying to reach to the farmers in a coordinated way, not just throwing the technology at them, but maybe accompanying some of trainings. And we've seen, you know, in different places, and just again coming back from Kenya, how these elements of training and how we manage to bring the information to the farmers is a really important thing. To add to this, you know, indeed the noise is quite problematic, and we see that in different regions around the world. Farmers are feeling that they are being there to test a lot of these techs, but ultimately are not getting a lot of benefit at this stage. So going back to Lumna's point, how do we showcase, you know, the benefits? How do we make sure we test? And I think that goes back to one of the core issue in agriculture, which is it's not in fintech, right? Agtech has to follow nature when it comes to testing. And so that's one of the big issue we always have. You know, it takes longer to test these technologies, and that comes to the point of access to finance, because of course then we're talking about what we call, you know, in some environment, patient capital. So, you know, I suspect Cropin has had to go through this quite a bit. And I would like to move on to another issue which I've seen can be problematic, which is, you know, the question of entrepreneurship ecosystem, entrepreneurship spirit, and the question of capacity. You know, we see that in many countries, and yes, again, the 2 examples I gave, it's pretty striking. You know, you can train a lot of people, but ultimately they do go to the private sector, usually where there are better salaries, which, you know, we can't really blame them for. Or, you know, so sometimes it's a brain drain, or, you know, how do we bring into these countries, probably more on the nascent front, or maybe, you know, an intermediate front, how do we bring these kind of entrepreneurship thinking? How do we bring maybe also the security? And I will just, you know, tell you where I'm going with this is, you know, can we think of co-creation maybe with different levels of maturity of ecosystem, and how could maybe this help in the case of Morocco in showcasing what can be done, or bringing the complementarity of knowledge, but also in the case of a country like Madagascar, where, you know, there's really a real issue in how we approach entrepreneurship. So I don't know, maybe Maxime, you could come on this and say a few words, and I'll let the others think a little bit longer about this.
Everyone, just being back. The question of what you just talked about, Marianne, is very key to go directly into the ecosystems and make it real. Anyway, I'm just not gonna be that long. Let me know what I can ask or I can add to the discussion. I'll be able to answer the question.
I might have a few examples, because we did exactly that in Singapore. Israel is a very entrepreneurial country, and I'm sure everybody knows that. We are considered to be the startup nation. So entrepreneurship is not an issue in Israel. I think it goes to necessity a lot. And actually, I think this is a positive point for developing countries. In many cases, Israel is a developing country. And I think, you know, the sense of urgency and, you know, instability even really pushes a lot of entrepreneurship. And Singapore is the opposite. People chose to be employed by the government and the big corporates rather, you know, the private sector being entrepreneur, because there's a certain fear of failure. This is, you know, a component of a culture that is not so acceptable. And being an entrepreneur is you need to fail. This is part of you know, your journey. So in countries that are very developed and you have other opportunities rather than being an entrepreneur, it's much more difficult to foster entrepreneurship. And one of the challenges we have in Singapore is finding those young CEOs that are willing to take a chance and a risk. And I think actually in developing countries, taking chances and risk exists much more because of the situation. And in Israel, what we do, maybe because it's part of the culture, we see so many entrepreneurs around us, but It comes already when you are young. And when you're in middle school and high school, you have entrepreneurship programs. Entrepreneurs come to high schools and speak about being an entrepreneur, what it is. I lecture to sophomores, in universities, first degrees, about being an entrepreneur. It's part of the education system for quite an early stage.
I can maybe add on to what Sarah has mentioned. I totally agree. And I think also what worked well from what we saw in Morocco or in France is when you have some incentives first coming from the government. We're talking about all the admin procedures with becoming an entrepreneur, with having access to financing, to recruiting people, all the administrative that is around that. If it's made easier, it becomes less of a burden to become a startupper. And also having success stories, communication around startups that worked, rather, even though you have the failure rate and it's part of entrepreneurship, and you need to have this entrepreneurial spirit if you want to launch a company, but you also need to get inspired by other people who launched startups in their countries. And for that, we need to have more communication, more specialized media, for example, that would relate this kind of information, this kind of fundraising. This is something that is really common in the US, for example, but we don't have that in emerging markets yet. And the last thing is the entrepreneurial mindset in general and the methodology behind launching a startup, going from I have an idea, I can launch a startup, to actually knowing all the different steps you need to put in place before you can have a startup and make it work and make it grow. There are more and more free trainings online, and it needs to continue to be free and accessible to everyone, especially students, because they are potentially future entrepreneurs, but also we have what is called entrepreneurship, so within corporates. And we have done that a lot at InSkip, putting some sort of training into innovation, into how to launch a company or a business unit within your corporate. And it's also something that already gets you into the mind of launching something and getting ownership on your projects. And you may become afterwards a startupper, for example.
Thank you very much. So unless someone else wants to intervene on that topic, I'll move to my last question, which is usually where I go with these webinars, which is the point originally for us at the World Bank is, so to you, what could be the role of an organization like the World Bank in supporting the development of these ecosystems? We had some actors saying the World Bank needs to be there to ignite, these ecosystems. The World Bank is a honest broker, a convener. So, how do you think would be the first step for the World Bank in, looking into supporting these ecosystems? Who wants to take the floor? Big silence. Lina, come on. Yeah. You can say a few words, I'm sure.
You're finishing with the difficult question. What can you do? Well, I think we have probably a lot of also World Bank people in the audience, and feel free to share your insights on the chat. We will totally benefit from it. In my opinion, the main role of the World Bank would be to try and get the right information and be a sort of lobbying actor towards the different government that you are working with, and try and show them what are the objectives, what are the real action plans that you can put in place to have an impact on the smallholder farmers. And for that, it is, I think in the past few years or in the past decades, there has been a lot of studies, a lot of, let's say, superficial analysis of the markets and what can be done. And we need to go a little bit further and deep dive more into each ecosystem and benefit from all these studies that have been made, and try and get only the right information and use that to put a real action plan in place and co-construct it with the government, and not just trying to give money and not know where it's going, or not follow up afterwards where what actions they have actually put in place, but become real partners in these endeavors. For me, it's what makes more sense. Being more operational and partnering with companies, potentially outsource some parts of the work with companies that are experts on that, or local companies, etc., to make sure that the work is actually done and that it has an impact at the end.
Thank you. Anyone wants to take the floor? Otherwise, I'll say some last few words. Well, thank you so much. I think there is quite a lot of work that the World Bank can do. I'm sure there's the idea of de-risking the ecosystem, and you're absolutely right. The issue that we see these days is how do we avoid, having so many amazing pilots which are never brought to scale? How do we avoid having this tendency of having so many innovation challenges, but no program to get these companies which are selected to actually thrive and, go to scale. So, we have to be maybe a bit more thoughtful in thinking longer term in terms of how do we get these innovations to the ground. So thank you so much. I see someone says building strong entrepreneur skills is key. Yes, I agree with you. Let's finish on this last comment, and thank you all so much for being with us today. I hope we can continue to think and move in this topic, because I think this is really where the next phase is for us. So looking forward to engaging with you all. I saw there were a lot of exchanges of emails in the chat, so looking forward to hearing from your companies too. Thanks a lot and have a good day. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.